Hello there, everyone who's watching, and welcome to today's episode of Trope Talk with Sam. What is Trope Talk, you may be asking? This is actually the first time I've done a video called that. It's a segment I might start doing more often if people like it, but I want to kind of talk about different fiction. If you don't know what a trope is, well, quick way to find out is to Google the website TV tropes and just fall into a rabbit hole there for a long time. But it's a recurring element in fiction, often a character or maybe a story scenario or something in fiction where there's a lot of them, or like they're kind of reused over time. Um, something basically like the hero or the villain or the guide, the mentor character, the love interest. Just for example, every story has, or many stories have, those same character types recurring. So a trope is something like that, and I kind of want to talk about different tropes in fiction that I'm seeing and wondering about and analyzing, and I'll apply that to pop culture and to a lot of the stories that I read and that some of us like, and of course I'll apply it to my own writing and hopefully to your writing as well. So listen in, and I'll explore this topic for a little bit, and I want to make this interactive too. I have some questions that I posted in the video description, but I'll ask them here, and I'll elaborate more. But first, so today, the trope I want to talk about is a character who I was trying to figure out the best way to describe this. Um, excuse me, a character who is either strategic or maybe ambitious or cunning. We might call them a mastermind, possibly a strategic or logical mastermind, or just a character with grand ambitions of some sort, like to, I don't know. I read a lot of superhero, Star Wars stuff, so like something about winning over one's enemies or putting the bad guys away, things like that. A character who has those intentions, but with strategy and cunning, and more than just bashing people in. They're kind of intellectual and I guess a planner beforehand. So I hope I described that well enough. I'll give you some examples if you can't figure it out, but I couldn't figure out which adjective I wanted to tie to it. But strategic or ambitious or cunning or logical, maybe. I know those are not all exact synonyms, but characters like that. And I want to ask you, for one, who are your favorite characters of that type? Who fit that stereotype? Two, do you have any in your story? And three, why is it that these kinds of characters are almost always portrayed negatively? And if you don't know what I'm talking about there, I'm about to give you some examples. So those are my questions. Do you have any strategic, ambitious characters in your story? What other ones do you see in fiction? And why are these characters always portrayed negatively, in a negative light, it seems? Let me give you some examples so you know what I'm talking about. So I started thinking about these classic hero villain examples. One prominent example from pop culture is Thor and Loki. Okay, obviously there's Norse mythology, but I'm especially talking about the portrayal in Marvel comics and movies. Um, Thor's the hero, and I mean, he's not stupid, but if we had to classify him in this dichotomy, he's definitely more brawn than brains. He relies on his muscles. He is rash, impulsive. At least when we first meet him in the movies. I mean, one could argue he has undergoes some character development and some growth, but generally speaking, he thinks with his fists or with his hammer. He's reactive, by which I mean, he stops crises that he sees, but he doesn't like have a master plan to like keep the world safe in advance. He just kind of reacts to things. He's very straightforward and brash. He's not subtle at all. Really, that's Thor. Okay. Contrast that with Loki, his half brother or stepbrother or whatever, and nemesis. Loki obviously is the trickster god. He's cunning, he's crafty, he's strategic. I mean, everyone knows he's a liar, or you can't quite trust him. But he always has some plan, and even if you think you know his plan, or even if you know he's lying, he has plans within plans and secrets within secrets, and all these things. And he often has large plans, either to gain glory or power for himself, or at times he's an anti-hero. Now he has his own show now, so even if he's not completely evil, he's at least trying to accomplish something with his grand scheming. Okay, so just a classic hero villain example. Again, I know Loki's an anti-hero sometimes, but just for our purposes, classically he's been, a villain. Classic hero villain example. The hero is bold, brash, reactive, not subtle, um, not too smart overly. The villain is strategic and cunning. Hey, I'm seeing some chats in the comment or some comments in the chat. Thank you. Yeah, if you have examples or just comments along the way, feel free to add. Feel free to speak up. So thanks, Christopher, for being here. Another example, I'll give you this one from my story. Some of you have heard me read portions of it or heard me talk about it online. I have a superhero group. The character of Miracle versus the character of Neuron. And I didn't realize until later, both of these characters are slightly based on different facets of my own personality. Miracle, I kind of did it intentionally, different halves of myself, if you will. He's kind of this awkward, everyman guy, I guess how I saw myself maybe 10 years ago when I started writing my story. And he has a good heart, but he's sometimes confused by real life, or he doesn't, he doesn't always understand the real world. He's awkward a little bit, not really. I guess doesn't always know how to handle himself in high pressure situations or in formal situations. Whatever, he tries to do the right thing, but he makes mistakes. He's also reactive. Whereas Neuron, on the other hand, Neuron is a character I have who starts as a hero. Spoilers: he later turns into a villain. And there's a whole complicated reason for that I could explain in character development. But he's definitely a mastermind. He has mind control and things like that. But even before that, he prides himself on being logical and devoid of emotion, supposedly not ruled by emotion. He believes he's logical, and he wants to bring order to the world or to his sphere of influence, but he's willing to do that through chaotic means, or even through amoral or immoral means if that's what he needs. So I wrote a blog post a while back. You can find it on my WordPress blog if you ever have that. If you still have access to that, about how Miracle and Neuron. I mean, I didn't intentionally write them as mirror images of each other, but I later realized subconsciously they both kind of correspond to different sides of my personality. I think if I became a villain, I would be a little bit like Neuron. I'm not planning to be a villain anytime soon, but just this strategic, cold, calculating mastermind kind of thing. Okay. Yeah, Christopher, you posted like one of your characters. I'll get to that later, a little bit later. I'm going to ask about everyone's characters there, but yeah. So those are just two like superhero examples of this kind of economy. I was recently reading a comic, a Daredevil comic. It was in one of the recent runs, if I'm following along at home. The relatively recent series written by Chip Zdarsky. I'm not sure if I'm saying his last name right. It was maybe number 13 or something like that, around there. You can look for it yourself if you really want to. But Daredevil was training with Elektra, his sometimes ex-girlfriend, or his ex-girlfriend, anti-hero, whatever. And Daredevil has this kind of his tortured guilt and self-doubt, and he says like, I need to be better, and like I'm trying to do this better, and Elektra kind of chided him and said like, you've never really had any concrete plans, just these vague goals. Like when a hero says, I need to be better, that's not a real plan, just a vague goal. And she was kind of chiding him for that. And I was like, yeah, but that's how most heroes are. Most heroes, and like, and when they do start to have concrete plans or whatever, that's usually when they start going bad. Let me give you an example of that. A lot of our characters, just because comics are cyclical and sometimes gimmicky and ambiguous these days, a lot of our characters have gone back and forth, or they'll go dark for a while, and of course they're always redeemed. But it's how different writers play with their characters and try to give them variation and such. So let me give you some examples of when the hero has started exhibiting these traits like strategy or cunning and ambition, when they started to become more proactive against crime or against threats rather than just reactive. And my thesis today, if you will, or my synopsis, whatever, is that for whatever reason, this is almost always portrayed as a bad thing. When a hero starts being strategic or ambitious or cunning, and they start being like proactive instead of reactive, it's almost always a bad thing. I'll give you another Daredevil example of a time when he actually did have a big plan. This was from the comics maybe 10 or 12 years ago. There was an event called Shadowland, and it's kind of the trope of the hero, like is tempted to use crime for good. They're like, if I can control crime rather than fighting it, then maybe I can at least do some good. And I mean, I think a lot of us have problems with that for moral reasons, but it's an interesting temptation, or at least an interesting philosophical moral concept for the hero to play with. And so that there was an arc where Daredevil became leader of the Hand. The Hand is like his enemy, like this clan of ninja assassins who he often fights, but he became their leader, and he's like, oh, if I can use them to patrol the city and keep people in check, then I'll eliminate crime, and obviously that didn't go well for him, and obviously that set him on a dark path. So Chris said, "Violence is not the winner of wars; it's the fuel of wars." I like that. Yeah, I mean, I think these stories usually a hero who tries to fight fire with fire. They usually portray them as like that didn't work out for them, or it sets the hero on a dark path. I think that's kind of the moral, if you will, of these stories. Another example from Marvel Comics. That's the kind of thing I like. Superior Spider-Man. It was a story they did back in like 2013 maybe, and where Doc Ock's mind inhabited Spider-Man's body. I know the sci-fi reason they gave for it is gimmicky. Just roll with it. Comics are weird, but it did allow for some interesting moral questions and character development. Like, so now Doc Ock in Spider-Man's body is trying to be a hero, or at least an anti-hero, whatever. But he does it with strategic mastermind supervillain ways. Like he starts patrolling the city with his little octo robots, and to make sure no one's committing any crimes. Like, he's spying on people, and again, being proactive against crimes. And he starts, like, I think, capturing some of the other villains and forcing them to work for him, and stuff like that. And so has good ends, good intentions. He's trying to keep the city safe, but he's using a lot of bad, morally ambiguous ways to do so. And I think that's because he's the strategic mastermind, proactive character, whatever. Also, in Civil War II, in the comics, that happened like maybe 2016-ish. The second Civil War, there was a character who could see the future, like he could see visions of the future of crimes or disasters that were about to happen. And then there was kind of this debate, moral dilemma, largely between Iron Man and Captain Marvel about, is it ethical or even practical, whatever, to use this information to stop crimes in advance or not. I think Minority Report also, if you ever saw that movie, it's kind of the same dilemma there. And Captain Marvel was on the side of, we should use these things, like we should know in advance what's coming and use it to protect people and stop crimes. But I think they kind of portrayed her side as not quite in the right. Spoilers: Tony was a martyr at the end. I mean, he came back, because everyone comes back in comics. But it's the same thing as in the original Civil War, in the comics. Not the movie. In the comics, the character who was kind of on the right, or in the right, according to Marvel, they had a sacrificial martyrdom death. Captain America died in the original Civil War. The comics, he came back. Don't worry. But it kind of shows which side they think is right and which side they think is wrong. Yeah. So that's an example. I was even watching. I mean, I was already thinking of these ideas for a while, but I was recently watching an episode of The Flash. I'm catching up on the last season, and I believe this was season 7, episode 2. For those following along at home, and The Flash, it's cheesy. I mean, even more so than some of these comics. I know it's cheesy, it's gimmicky, but it's fun for me. It's like a soap opera for nerds. Anyway, there was an episode where Barry's thinking got enhanced too, so he can not only run fast, but he could think fast, and basically he was able to think through probabilities and calculations in the blink of an eye faster than anyone else could. And even and that was like a temporary thing for one episode, but even in doing that, he started becoming the calculating guy who always has a plan. But then they also showed him his personality becoming cold, because for whatever reason, those things are associated in our fiction these days. It seems like once you become the mastermind, the planner, your heart starts going cold too. So he was treating people as calculations, and he's like, logically, based on the probability, we can't save everyone. We have to choose. Whereas most heroes, and even Barry in his normal mental state, would never choose between saving people. They would find a way to save everyone. But he's like, we can't do it. We have to choose. And he starts using people and just to achieve his ends and things like this. And obviously that didn't last because he's the hero. They always bring him back. But that's one example. The last example I have for now of this being a bad thing goes back to classic literature, which I'm a student of. I love comics too. There's obviously low fiction that I love, but I was an English major in school. I'm thinking back to Nathaniel Hawthorne and the Romantics. He's most known for the Scarlet Letter. I took a class that was on Hawthorne, and so I read. I think most of his novels, if not all of his novels, and several of his short stories. And in the Romantic period, which was around when he was writing, they had kind of this idea of like nature good, science bad. We could parse that a little bit more and say whether or not we agree with that these days, or whether that's too simple. But basically, anyone who was like a scientist or who was like messing with powers beyond their control or beyond their knowledge, even if they had good intentions at first, they were not usually portrayed well. Rappaccini's daughter, her father, um, created basically a monster or a poisonous girl. He was trying to do some good experiments, but didn't work out. Even the Blythedale romance character of Hollingsworth wasn't necessarily a scientist, but he had this great plan to do good, to reform criminals. But even that, like his plan became so obsessed with his plan that he ended up going in a bad direction himself. And I'm sure there's more examples even in Hawthorne, if not all of literature. So I'm just seeing over and over again. I'm sure you can find some counterexamples too. I'll ask you about that at the end. But I'm seeing over all this time, in modern superhero comics and shows, and also going all the way back to the 1800s with Hawthorne, this idea that a character who is strategic or ambitious or logically minded or a mastermind in some way, that when they become that or when they act like that, they also become morally ambiguous and cold and calculating, and just the author doesn't usually praise them, and that their side is not usually taken as the good side. Counterexamples, slightly kind of. I realize there are good guys who fit this bill of being like the planner, the mastermind, whatever. But when they do, they're usually portrayed as antisocial or ill-adjusted. Classic example is Batman. At least, I know there's been a lot of versions of Batman over the time, but how he's often portrayed these days. He is the guy who has a preparation for everything, who has plans within plans, who's has this lifelong war against criminals, and yes, he's a good guy, but he's not well adjusted. If that wasn't clear, he never holds down a real relationship, except for maybe with his proteges, and he's training them to be crime fighters too. That's morally ambiguous to some, and he's portrayed as dark and unfeeling and uncaring and all this stuff. So even though he's a good guy, he's portrayed as like some would say an anti-hero, at least a dark hero. At least a dark, brooding, lonely hero who never really finds true happiness or true redemption. I also think of Sherlock. Again, I'm going by largely by the BBC series, maybe some modern interpretations, but he is obviously the logical, strategic detective, the mastermind in that sense. But he's portrayed as arrogant, rude, sometimes without meaning to, aloof, and he thinks he's smarter than everyone else. To be fair, he probably is smarter than everyone else, but his social skills are lacking to say the least, and even though he's a good guy, he's not a nice person really. He has maybe one friend, Watson, but he's not like the guy everyone wants to be around. Even in comedy, I think of things like The Big Bang Theory and Sheldon. Sheldon Cooper has this kind of personality. Often, like he thinks he's smarter than everyone else. To be fair, he probably is. At least a lot of people. Smarter book smart, yes, not in every way. Um, and you know he thinks he's logical and above regular emotions and things like that, and he he always has these complex, well thought out reasons, or in his mind, well thought out reasons for everything he does. But definitely lacking in social skills. I mean, that's where the humor comes from. If that wasn't obvious already, he's an example. And even last example for now of this category in Star Wars, Grand Admiral Thrawn. I gave some reviews recently of the Thrawn books. I've been reading those. He's an anti-hero. In some of the books, he's a villain, but then they've done a few series where he, with his own, where he's the protagonist, and he is definitely a strategic mastermind, military mastermind who has these grand plans and for defeating his enemies and things like that. Has these high ambitions for defeating his enemies and bringing military glory to his people, but he's very much again low on social skills, low on personal relationships. He's often portrayed as distant, unfeeling, that kind of thing. So I'm just like, why are these things always associated with each other? Like, obviously there are characters and are going to be even real people who fit this bill, but I'm like, why are these traits always associated with each other? Why is it that being strategic and aloof or I guess being strategic and ambitious and all these and logical minded and a mastermind. These things are always portrayed with either being a villain or at least being an antisocial, not nice person. Okay, and sorry, Christopher. Let me read your comment because I said I was going to get to that. You said my character Tony Rogers starts out innocent, turns bad after kidnapping by the Supreme Master of Darkness, and through fighting love returns back to the light, harder and stronger. Cool. So another morally ambiguous character. I don't know much about him. But yeah, it sounds like he turns to the dark for a while, and then comes back. So I have I have at least one character who I mentioned who starts out good, turns bad. I won't tell you how the story ends up right now. Um, so my question is, why are these traits always paired that way? Like why is almost every character who has strategy and ambition and such seen as either evil or just, if not evil, then poorly adjusted, antisocial, prickly, that kind of things? Do those traits, are they traits inherently bad or immoral? Is it always this way in real life for everyone who thinks that way? I like to think not, because I have some elements of this trait in my mind. I know I'm not like a super genius mastermind, but parts of me, parts of my personality feel like this kind of strategy sometimes, and then I like to think I have a real life and I'm well adjusted, but I've had trouble where these parts of my personality clash with other people, even with my wife and my friends and such. So like, are these traits inherently bad? Why do we so often see them portrayed as negative? And I'm not necessarily answering those questions today. I'm just trying to get us to think and asking you if you've seen any other examples, or if you have an example in your story, or if you have any counter examples. I was trying to think through counter examples. Are there any examples where strategy and ambition and being logically minded and such are portrayed as good or positive, or are at least not portrayed as bad? I was thinking through all of my fiction and such. Off the top of my head, I could only think of one good example, one good counter example, and the one I thought of is, drumroll please, Spock. Mr. Spock, of course, is the original logical character, who even uses that word, even talks about being logical and such. And he's not a bad guy. He's not even really portrayed as antisocial or anything. Maybe in the Mirror universe, I thought about why is that? And I mean, even though he's logically minded, he's not really overly ambitious or power hungry. Like he's still willing to submit to a captain. He still works for the good of his crew and not for his own ambitions or anything like that. He's not like making proactive plans to negate threats to the to Starfleet. He's just he's going along with his crew. He puts his logical mind to the service of others and to the service of the greater good. So he's one character who uses logic for good, uses his strategy and mastermind status for good. Off the top of my head, I couldn't really think of any prominent others. I'm sure they're out there somewhere. I'm sure you could mention one to me, and I'd be like, oh yeah, 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 but I can't really think of it anymore right now. It just seems like I know I'm going by stereotypes, I'm going by common tropes and things like that. But it seems like the common trope is, the good guys are proactive, or sorry, the good guys are reactive, not strategic, not not ambitious, not really a thinker necessarily, at least not a deep thinker, or at least not to this level. Um, Whereas the bad guys are strategic, cunning, crafty, ambitious, have plans within plans, and are proactive about getting what they want rather than just reacting to others. And if a hero does have those traits, they go down a dark path, and or they're at least ill-adjusted or antisocial or something. So that's my trope talk for today. So I would say you just start noticing these things when you read and watch fiction. Start noticing tropes like this. Ask yourself, why is that? Why is it portrayed like that? Is that true to real life? Is a good question to ask if you're trying to write on your own. Are there any counter examples? And again, do you have any characters like this in your story? Do you have any characters where you've implemented this trope? And I did a video on tropes before. Tropes are not bad things to use in stories. I mean, stories are made of them. You don't want to overuse tropes or make it so obvious that everyone just thinks it's just a trope on its own. But every story has tropes. My story has tropes. You can't avoid it. So I would say if you do use a trope like this, understand that it's there, that you're doing it, understand why you're doing it, and I mean it can make for a good story. I give an example from my own story of characters who fit this bill, but it's just like, why are we? I'm curious. Why are these characters always portrayed negatively? Almost always, it seems. And I don't have the answer for you today. I'm sure there's much deeper questions we can ask about society and literature and why and psychology and why we think that is. But I'm more so saying, since we have this information, what are we as writers going to do with it? Be aware of it. Use it in your next story. Use it to flesh out your characters and to use a trope but make them their own still. And hopefully your story will be that much richer because of it. So that's all for today. Thanks for listening. Couple quick announcements before I sign up. I've started to post some of these videos to YouTube. I have a YouTube channel, and I've started to use TikTok. I admit I'm 31. I'm not a big I'm not the hip cool young generation anymore. I'm a little confused by TikTok, and I wasn't sure what I was going to post on there because the videos are so short. I do these videos talking about writing and books and stuff, but on TikTok they're so short. I'm like, how much can I really post there? But I've started to use it, so go give me a follow. I'm Samuel N. Harris, author. I think on YouTube I might be Samuel Harris, or it might be my name backwards, which I used to use as my username. I stopped doing that because it's confusing to people. And if I'm trying to promote myself, it's going to be hard to keep track of. But it would then be Sirra Leumas, which is SIRRAHLEUMAS. Anyway, I'm on TikTok. I'm on YouTube under one of those names. So find me there. Keep looking at my videos and such. Gonna keep talking about writing and books and all that stuff. If you want to keep getting updates in your email, there's a link in the video description where you can click and sign up and never miss an update. And yeah, until then, thanks for listening. Thanks for being here today. Thanks for supporting me in these videos and such. Happy reading, happy writing, happy troping. Have a great weekend. Thanks for listening. Bye.